Have you ever stopped and wondered, are your reactions, choices, and behaviors truly your own? Or are they just the result of a training program so subtle you've mistaken it for yourself? You learn to be likable, to keep the peace, to please others, and to be acceptable. You think this is kindness, but Carl Jung would not call it that. He called it a mask, a persona. It's the shell you wear to survive in society. But Jung warned, when you begin to confuse that mask with your true identity, you risk losing your very soul. Here's the uncomfortable but urgent question. What would happen if you stopped trying to please everyone? Today, we'll peel back the layers of people-pleasing to understand why this isn't kindness, but a subtle betrayal of yourself. You'll discover why you feel exhausted, why you no longer believe anyone truly understands you, and most importantly, how to break free from that cycle without losing yourself. Some truths may unsettle you, but they might also set you free forever. By the end, you'll have the key to begin your journey back to being yourself clearly and authentically. Subscribe to this channel and share with your loved ones as we dive into the business of the day. Are you ready to take off that mask? The people pleaser, a trained archetype. No one is born to please others. We enter this world with an instinctive cry, with a need to be loved, nurtured, and cared for. But very early on, a child learns a painful truth. Love is not always unconditional. Sometimes, to stay in the embrace of adults, they must hide their tears, suppress their anger, and learn to please. And so begins the first negotiation with the self, a silent conditioning that few escape. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social mask we're taught to wear. Jung wrote, "The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, a kind of mask designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. You learn that to be loved, you must be good. To avoid abandonment, you must be agreeable. To survive, you sometimes have to swallow your truth. What begins as a survival strategy becomes the starring role in your life. You smile when you want to cry. You say yes when your heart screams, "No, I don't want this." You slip into the role of the considerate one so seamlessly that one day you forget it's just a role. Culture and society don't just encourage this mask, they glorify it. Look at the characters in films, television, fairy tales. The ideal mother never complains. The good wife always endures. The obedient daughter steps back to let her brothers shine. Meanwhile, those who dare to express dissatisfaction, anger, needs, or boundaries are labeled difficult, selfish, or too sensitive. You, growing up in such a world, learned to survive by shrinking. You became better at reading others' emotions than your own, better at pleasing than being truthful, better at keeping the peace than keeping yourself. Others call you thoughtful, mature, and always helpful, but only you know what's inside. A vague sense of fading, as if no one, not even you, truly sees you anymore. Jung warned that the persona is a necessary tool for living in society, but he also said, when you identify with the mask, you cease to live. You become a mere shadow reflecting others' expectations. That's when your soul begins to falter. You're present everywhere, doing everything, helping everyone, but you feel like you belong nowhere. At the deepest level of psychology, the people pleaser isn't simply a kind person. They're someone living in a state of chronic defense. Beneath the kindness lies a primal fear. Fear of rejection, fear of disappointing others, fear of being left alone. Think of Nina in Black Swan, a perfect, submissive dancer controlled by her mother and the pressures of her director. She suppresses every instinct, every desire, every ounce of anger to become the white swan, pure and exalted. But as she embodies her role, the black swan, the rejected shadow, begins to rise, shattering her mask. Nina doesn't lose her mind because she rebels. She loses it because she's torn between her true self and the self society demands her to be. You don't need to be a dancer to understand this. Every people pleaser is performing a role without an audience. Yet they can't stop, because if you stop, you fear you'll no longer be loved. But Jung would say, if you must pretend to be loved, they don't love you. They only love the mask you're wearing. The people pleaser as shadow. The people pleaser is not merely a personality type or behavioral strategy. In Carl Jung's view, it is a form of shadow, the part buried deep in the unconscious, disguised by an outward appearance of kindness. This shadow doesn't roar, it whispers. It doesn't rebel, it bows. And for that reason, It's more dangerous than any other part of the psyche. Jung defined the shadow as all the parts of ourselves that are rejected, suppressed, or unacknowledged, not because they're inherently bad, but because they don't fit the image society expects us to project. For the people pleaser, the shadow often consists of anger, the need to be prioritized, the voice of the self, boundaries, and the desire to say no. These parts are deemed selfish, disruptive, or troublesome, so they're pushed down into the depths of the unconscious. But what is buried too long rises in ways no one expects. People pleasers believe they've chosen a gentle, harmonious path, but in truth, they live a life of silent contradiction. On the outside, a smile. On the inside, an undercurrent of unnamed emotions. They hide their anger, pretend to be fine, and deny their personal needs, fearing that living authentically would cost them love, recognition, or their place in others' lives. And because of this, they're not as gentle as others might think, not in an overtly aggressive way, but through distorted anger that leaks through passive behaviors. They don't speak out, but they sigh. They don't react, but they withdraw. They don't shout, but their hearts are filled with resentment and self-reproach. Have you ever seen someone who constantly helps others but often feels taken advantage of? Someone who always carries the load but slips into exhaustion, self-pity, or silently blames the world for not being grateful? That's the shadow at work. No one asked them to sacrifice. They did it themselves, only to resent being undervalued. They give without truly wanting to, yet expect something in return that no one promised. This isn't giving. It's a silent negotiation between themselves and the world, where no one speaks but everyone grows weary. The shadow in the people pleaser isn't just anger. It's also the longing to exist as themselves, unapologetically, without needing to prove or please anyone. But that need is labeled bad, so it's shoved to the bottom of the psyche. Over time, they begin to believe their authentic presence is a burden to others, and so they disappear not by abandoning everything, but by retreating bit by bit from their true self, as if their genuine existence is something to be hidden for safety. From a psychological perspective, this is fawning, a lesser-known survival response compared to fight, flight, or freeze. Fawning is when we respond to a threat by pleasing, soothing, or over-cooperating to avoid conflict. From this response, we form a false, good self. But the truth is, you cannot preserve love or relationships by erasing your authenticity. Imagine yourself as a night sky full of stars. Some stars shine brightly, admired and praised, and you learn to show only those radiant points. The rest you cover with clouds. You hide the dark, imperfect corners. As if others saw them, they'd stop looking up. So you live as a curated sky, shining only where permitted, the rest held in controlled silence. But what you forget is this: a sky isn't just stars. It needs the darkness to let those stars shine true. And when those clouds linger too long unacknowledged, unexpressed, unable to breathe, they eventually form a storm. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Awakening doesn't come from striving for perfection, but from facing the parts you've left behind. When you please others to the point of forgetting yourself, you're not loving, you're erasing your essence. Every insincere nod, every "it's okay" when your heart is breaking, is another layer of earth piled onto the buried shadow. And like any part of the psyche ignored too long, the shadow doesn't stay asleep. It returns through unexplained depression, vague discontent, or the loss of meaning in every relationship. The cost of being likable: people pleasers don't collapse in a torrential storm. They fade bit by bit, like ink bleeding into water, like an echo growing fainter in an empty cave. No one notices the moment they begin to dissolve into nothingness. There's no alarm, no warning. Just one day they wake up in their own life and find everything familiar, yet they feel so lost it takes their breath away. Jung warned, "The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents." But if we expand this, we see a greater truth. The greatest tragedy of life is when you live without truly being present in your own story. People pleasers believe that the more agreeable, yielding, and gentle they are, the more they'll be loved. But ironically, the world doesn't appreciate that invisibility. It takes it for granted. It overlooks it. It grows accustomed to your yes, your help, your softness, until it no longer sees it. And slowly, people unconsciously cross boundaries you never dared to set. Not because they're cruel, but because you taught them to. Every time you swallow a no, every time you choose others' comfort over your truth, you're telling the world, I'll endure, I won't demand it. And so they believe you. They believe in a version of you that you can no longer breathe in. But that belief is misplaced, and the cost is that you begin to feel worthless in your relationships. You're everywhere at work, with friends, in family, but you feel like a shadow. You reply to messages quickly, help without hesitation, and are always there when needed. But when you're weary and need a shoulder, there's only emptiness around you. The exhaustion you feel doesn't come from work or responsibilities. It comes from constantly twisting yourself into a shape that fits others' expectations. Every time something stirs in you, a spark of anger, a hint of frustration, a desire to say, I don't want to anymore, you douse it with cold water. You were taught those emotions are dangerous, selfish. But Jung said, what you resist not only persists but will grow in size. Suppressed emotions don't vanish, they transform. They seep into your body as insomnia, headaches, chronic fatigue, a sense of meaninglessness, or the feeling of living a life that isn't yours. Joy becomes suspect. You no longer feel alive. A compliment doesn't touch your heart because you know it's for the mask you wear, not the authentic part withering inside. And then a distinct feeling emerges, silent resentment. You're not angry at anyone specifically. You just start feeling irritated by everything. A small request makes you want to retreat. An innocent expectation feels suffocating, but instead of expressing it, you hide it and blame yourself. Am I being too selfish? And so the cycle continues, a self withering away, yet trying to convince itself to be kind. It's like a kettle on a low flame, simmering quietly. At first, only faint steam rises, but inside, pressure builds. Every request, every seemingly harmless expectation is like someone turning up the heat without knowing. Yet you simmer in silence until one day the kettle doesn't whistle, it explodes. Jung would call this passive aggression, the quiet anger of a shadow suppressed too long. It doesn't erupt like overt rage, it leaks. It shows in a weary tone, a distant look, a nod while the heart refuses, and then relationships begin to crack. I once knew a woman like this, a diligent employee, a devoted mother, a gentle wife. She handled work without complaint, cared for her family without protest. Colleagues relied on her. Everyone loved her. Everyone called her the ideal woman. But one day she vanished from it all. Quit her job, left the house in disarray, made no breakfast. People called it a midlife crisis. But from Jung's perspective, it wasn't a crisis. It was the soul's final response, a soul forced to live too long in a mask so kind it left no room for truth. The turning point of awakening. Awakening doesn't come like a clap of thunder. It arrives as a tiny crack in the center of your chest, the first fracture in a shell you've worn for too long. There's no proclamation, no drama. Just one day you sit within your own life and see everything in its place, quiet, familiar. But you are no longer present in it, no longer real, no longer alive, as if you've been pushed to the edges of the story called me. Jung never encouraged rebellion against the world. He didn't advocate for breaking all bonds, but instead guided us inward toward the center of the soul where the true self lies dormant beneath the deepest layers, covered by the dust of should do, should be, should endure. He wrote, individuation is not about becoming better, it is about becoming yourself. The people pleaser doesn't begin the journey back with a scream. It starts with a strange, silent moment when the familiar yes catches in your throat. When a cry for help from someone else no longer prompts your usual response, not because you don't care, but because your body refuses to betray itself one more time. That's the soul waking up. And when it stirs, it doesn't shout. It only looks at you and whispers, enough. Awakening in Jung's journey isn't a revolt with blazing banners, but a gentle dismantling of a mask grown too tight. It's when you stop smiling when you don't want to. Stop saying it's fine when everything inside is collapsing. It's when you let anger rise to the surface, not to consume you, nor to drown it, but to look at it, name it, and give it a seat at the table of things worthy of existing. You stop trying to make others comfortable to gain acceptance. You begin to accept that making others uncomfortable may be the price of being true to yourself, and you no longer see that as a sin. You see it as a sign that you're returning. Imagine you're a dancer who's performed your whole life on someone else's stage. The lights aren't yours. The music isn't your choice. Every move is taught. This is beautiful. This earns applause. You dance until your feet are calloused, yet you keep smiling because the audience is still clapping until one day the music stops and you don't know how to move forward. Not because you've forgotten how to dance, but because you've never danced for yourself. Awakening is when you step off that stage quietly, without apology. You simply walk toward a space where you can move in ways never permitted. Rough, wild, asymmetrical, but yours, truly. At a psychological level, this is breaking free from fawning, the lesser-known survival response that defines the people-pleaser. Fawning makes you smile when you want to cry, nod when you want to scream, and compromise to avoid being rejected. But when you begin to unfawn, to dismantle the mechanism of soothing others by shrinking yourself, you start reclaiming your body, your time, your voice. You start responding more slowly, not out of arrogance, but because you're listening to yourself before reacting. You begin declining invitations, requests, or pressures not from lack of kindness, but because true kindness cannot be built on self-forgetting. And then you do something you never thought you had the right to. You allow yourself to do nothing, to save no one, to be unlovable, unremarkable, not considerate, and still deserve to exist. Of course, this will unsettle some people. They loved you when you were soft, easy, and always available. When you become clear, they'll call you different, distant, not yourself. But remember, you're not changing. You're simply done performing. Their disappointment isn't proof you're wrong. It's evidence you're doing something right. Jung wrote, "No one becomes light without passing through darkness. And the darkness isn't out there. It's the part of you hidden for fear of losing love." When you start asking, "Was it easy for me?" When you stop being easy, that's when your soul begins to be treated as a living entity, not a tool. The return isn't about reclaiming the world. It's about giving back to the world what isn't yours and taking back from yourself what you traded for love. Breaking free. First steps. So how do you start living differently? How do you, accustomed to saying yes, learn to say no? It begins with small, consistent, deeply symbolic actions. First, identify the mask. Before you can remove any mask, you must have the courage to look at it directly. Start by writing down the role you often play in relationships. Write truthfully. I am always the one who yields, always keeps the peace, always reliable. Then continue. I'm afraid of being seen as difficult, bothersome, no longer likable. Your answers trace the outline of the mask you wear. Choose one day, and in every interaction, observe yourself as if watching a performance. Each time you're about to say yes to someone, pause for 3 seconds and ask, if I say no right now, what am I afraid will happen? If the answer stems not from respect but from fear of being disliked, rejected, or seen as selfish, then you know the mask just spoke for you. Second, embrace guilt like withdrawal. The moment you stop reacting in the old way, you won't feel immediate relief. Instead, you'll feel guilt, a nagging sense that something's wrong, as if you've hurt someone, as if you're a bad person. But that's not the truth. It's the craving of a nervous system addicted to being loved through compliance. When guilt arises after declining a request, name it the moment it appears. Write a single sentence, I did nothing wrong. This is just an old feeling. Then place your hand on your chest, take a deep breath, and repeat silently, I don't need to be loved by disappearing. You're untangling the old link between kindness and self-erasure. Third, set boundaries without apology. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with handles, allowing you to engage with the world intentionally rather than letting others walk in freely while you struggle to say no. Write down 3 typical situations where you agree while your heart resists. For each situation, write a short, unapologetic refusal like, my schedule doesn't allow me to take on this task right now. No, sorry, or I'd love to, but, because every justification sends the message that your boundaries are negotiable. Choose one situation in the next 7 days to apply it. Say the phrase firmly, without hesitation, without softening it with extra words. Then don't text back immediately. Don't explain further. Simply let it be. After setting the boundary, a wave of guilt or unease will rise. Return to your breathing. Inhale deeply and repeat silently. I don't need to be understood to be respected. Finally, embrace the necessary cracks. After you set boundaries and stop compromising, some relationships won't seek you out as before. Some may criticize, turn away, or create distance. And this is where most people pleasers falter. They see the relationship crack and rush to mend it by erasing the boundaries they just set. But here's the truth. Each crack is an invitation to reassess the quality of a relationship. A relationship that only survives if you endure, don't speak the truth, or can't have boundaries isn't sustainable. It demands you shrink to exist without giving you space to grow. Write this down. If they can't accept my bounded self, this relationship needs adjustment. Understand that those who leave when you live authentically are not meant for you. Those who stay when you emerge, even rough and imperfect, are the beauty you've always sought. The journey home, you may lose some people. There may be cold glances, quiet judgments, unexpected distance from those once close. But remember this, those who leave when you live authentically were never really yours to begin with. Jung likened the journey to becoming yourself as shedding old skin, painful perhaps, lonely certainly, but it's the loneliness of a seed breaking through the earth. Not death, but a beginning. There will come a moment when you stand between two shores. One, the familiar comfort of being agreeable. The other, an unnamed land where you're no longer loved for being easy but accepted for being true. That land may feel empty, quiet, and strange at first, but then you'll realize you don't need to apologize for being tired, unhappy, or unable to meet expectations. There, you can exist as you are. True freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's having the courage to be wholly yourself, light and shadow, anger and love, boundaries and compassion, all of it, integrated, alive, and finally free. I really appreciate you for staying till the end of this video. Please subscribe to this channel for self-awakening videos like this.